Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Across the Park Extra. Myself, Ian Mills, and Gary Judge with an Everton FC special, really. We're delighted to be joined by someone from the 27 campaign. Anyone who is an Evertonian lately has heard about this campaign, whether you agree or you don't. If anyone's on Twitter, like myself, everyone will know this man. He does the business matters, and he also puts some great pictures of foods up with the hashtag Come Dine with the S. Get me starving every single time. It is Paul, the S from Twitter. Paul, thank you for joining us. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, good, thanks. Real pleasure to speak to you guys. Yeah, everything's good apart from Everton, actually. And yeah, the food is like sort of, it's a bit of a release mechanism.
Mate, I am starving every single time. Judgy's not on Twitter. I sort of man the Across the Park Twitter, and Judgy, just so you know, it is like a Michelin star dish that comes on every single night with a hashtag Come Dine with the Esk. My bank account, due to Just Eat, is all down to the Esk, putting photos up, I'll tell you what. But what we're here for, we told Paul off the air, it's a platform for the 27 campaign to talk about their plans, their hopes, their ambition, why they are doing what they are doing. We are planning to ask them some challenging questions whilst all giving them a platform. I think the first thing, Paul, I want to ask, really, why now and why the 27 campaign as a name?
Okay. About just over 6 weeks ago, so just before Christmas, some of the big social media accounts that follow Everton put a DM group together on Twitter, and they invited me in on it. And it was the idea was, what can we do about the football club? What can we do that brings together a load of fans and sends a message to the board and sends a message to Farhad Mashiri? And I thought, well, yeah, because I've tried to do that myself without involving other people necessarily over the years, in my own sort of way of doing things. So I thought, yeah, I'd quite like to get involved in this. So I did. The name 27 years is very simple, and it's very evocative. It's used against us by some fans. It's used against us by Liverpool fans, for example. But it should remind the board of how long it is since we've actually been successful. So 27 years was just an obvious name to use. The idea behind all of this is very simple. It's different from previous campaigns that people have had in the past, and this is not a criticism of anybody. It's just a different strategy. In the past, most Evertonians' sort of anger has been vented towards the board, and the board just sort of put up the ramparts, and they bat it back. I mean, they're impregnable in that sense. I took the view, and then other people took the view that actually the only person that can ever make change at Everton is Farhad Mashiri, because he's the guy that determines who's on the board. And if we can get to him, or if Evertonians generally can get to him and get him to realize that his interests as an investor, where he's obviously heavily invested, is quite similar to ours. We're heavily invested emotionally. Some people actually are heavily invested financially because they spend a lot of their disposable income traveling up and down the country, week in, week out, foregoing holidays, all sorts of different things, just to follow the team that they love. So, in a sense, that there should be an alignment of interests between Farhad Mashiri and the fans, because for his investment to work for him, the club needs to be successful. For us, the fans, it needs to be successful. I mean, we will continue to follow the club regardless, obviously. But the return on our investment, our emotional investment in the club, is to see a club that we're proud of, a club that is successful on the pitch, and sort of espouses the values that we all have as Evertonians. So it was the thought that if we could get that message to Farhad Mashiri, then he might listen to us, because it's a different message than you would send to the board, because you're asking the board to remove themselves And frankly, nobody ever voluntarily removes themselves from a position of power, and a position of power that is, very, very well rewarded financially. The difficulty with that is then how do you get the fans on board? And I'm gonna hold my hand up and say we haven't done that well yet. We had the 27 minutes campaign for the Arsenal match, and that worked in one sense. It worked in the sense that it got a lot of media attention. So we were the first article on BBC Match of the Day 2, and we had like a 3-minute slot there. First time I think ever Everton's been like the first thing. Sky, BT Sports, etc., and most of the newspapers covered it, and most of the newspapers have covered what we've done since. I think what we haven't done well, and we're addressing that now, is how do we give some form of ownership of this campaign to the fans? So to this date, it's been people like me, and there's probably half a dozen people who've been running this, who have either organised like the sit-in. Well, actually, the sit-in was organised by the originals, but organised the campaign, or organised the banners, organised like a couple of the photo shoots that have been done the last couple of days, and we haven't included the club. We haven't included the fans, and I think that's the bit that we now need to do. The other bit that we've done, and sorry to stop me at any point. The other bit the other bit that we've done is through people I know, through people that other people know. We're trying to make inroads into communicating with the people that can make the difference, make the changes. So Moshiri is, as he said last week, a very, very private man, very difficult to get to directly. But there are people who know. Clearly, there are people who know him. People in the football industry, his PR people, other people that do know him. And we're working very hard to get a message to him. And that message is the message that I gave at the beginning of this podcast, that our interests are aligned. We need to speak to him, because the view is, and it's a very simple view, that if we don't make change in the club, if we don't change the way the club is run, how can we possibly ever expect a change in performance? In the last 6 years, we've gone from being the best of the rest to being a potential relegation candidate. And that's a reflection of how, it's not a reflection of resources, because we've had more money than we've ever had in our history. It's a reflection of how badly the club is run. And that reflects on the board, but it also reflects on Fahad Moshiri, because he jumps in and out of the running of this football club as he sees fit. And the argument I would like to put to him is, you see clubs like Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Arsenal perhaps not, but Chelsea certainly, who are highly professional organizations, and they have the very best people running their organization. So whatever the role is, director of football, recruitment, sports injuries, whatever it is, they go out and they recruit the best people, because they know that the best people are going to do the best job. We don't do that. We end up with a guy who's very wealthy, a guy who's got, from what I know, a great interest in football, running our recruitment. So he's the guy that goes and finds the manager. He's the guy that sometimes goes and finds like the left back. It's ridiculous. How can we possibly expect to compete with clubs who are run very professionally with the best people in the industry when we're doing everything in such an amateurish way?
Just on that one, Paul, I can just start by saying your opening 3 minutes, 4 minutes was brilliant, and the way you articulated that, I couldn't have been in more agreement with what you set out there. So that for me was
thank you.
Really, really well received. I'm sure it will be from all the Evertonians who are listening to it. So thanks for that. Just a few like points from me on some of the points you just made. Then particularly in relation to like Chelsea, and even I look across the park as well. Do you not think that certainly early in Farhad Moshiri's reign when he brought in the likes of Steve Walsh, for example, that it was brought in with that intention that, for example, the work that Steve Walsh had done at Leicester was highly commendable, that he come in with a very strong reputation when he first came in. The same with Marcel Brands, across Europe at that time, he was one of the most heralded recruitment professionals, if you like, and has a somewhat of a track record at PSV as well. Do you not think there has been that effort there to go and seek out the best professionals? Carlo Ancelotti, obviously one of the best managers in the history of the world, and certainly in recent history as well. Do you not think there has been an effort to try and do that?
Yes, there has. But then when you get the people in, you have to give them the organizational structure, the responsibility, the authority to do the job that they're supposed to do. Yeah, it's like having a dog and barking yourself, and that's what we've ended up doing here. We've ended up bringing good people in, and none of those people, if you think about it, none of the outsiders that have been brought into the club over the last 6 years have survived. They've all stayed for a period of time and then moved on, and that's on the board, and it's also at different positions within the club. And the reason for that is that they're not given the space, they're not given the authority to do the job that they're capable of doing. And that comes back to the argument about governance. And governance is all about people recognizing what their roles are and allowing other people to do the bits that they can't do themselves or that they can do better. And I think it's a legacy issue in terms of our chairman and our CEO, for example, because they don't have a strong business background in terms of football. But it's then compounded by Farhad Moshiri being totally indisciplined and just dropping in and out as and when he sees fit. And that's the big issue. I genuinely think that's the big issue. And that's the whole idea of the campaign, is one, to get that argument out there. And then secondly, to get enough support from the fans to make Farhad Moshiri realise that we're serious about what we're talking about. Because the feedback that he gets is based on, for example, the survey that the club did at the end of last year, or sort of second half of last year, that 90% of fans think the club is well run. Well, everybody I know on social media, every Evertonian that I know personally, I don't think it's 9 out of 10 that think the club is well run. I think it's 9 out of 10 that think the club is not well run. And it's getting a body of support together that puts the pressure on these people to say, actually, we need to do something about this. Well, and that's what it's about. We haven't got all the answers. I'm not claiming to have all the answers, both in terms of gaining the support and also in the conversations that you would have with the Moshiri. But I think I've got enough to start the process, or we've got enough to start that process.
No, I agree with that. Just on the point you just made about, obviously, the questionnaire, then timing's everything, isn't it? I mean, obviously, we didn't end the season particularly well, but at that moment in time, I think Carlo Ancelotti was still manager. The new stadium was pretty much, in the bank. I think timing's everything when you ask people a question and go, well, compared to maybe where we were 10 years ago with next to no stadium and a manager with no money, etc. Depends which way you frame the question, doesn't it? But going back briefly to the whole owner dynamic with the governance, and you referred to Chelsea as well. Roman Abramovich has a very similar approach and stance in relation to his control over Chelsea. Bruce Buck's the chairman, a lot like Bill Kenwright in the sense that big supporter, not particularly a massive business acumen, if you will, but a very similar stance in that he doesn't really has much of a say, but then when he does have a say, it doesn't always have the impact that the fans want. I think that was with the appointment of Frank Lampard. It happened that way, and quickly Abramovich stepped in and got rid of him. You're always going to have that, aren't you, with an owner that is putting money into the pub or pumping money into the club, that at times they're going to step in and despite how much we want it, or for example, directors of football want to control things, they're going to step in and they're going to make their wishes known and they're going to execute them, aren't they? Whether we like it or not.
Yeah, But the one thing I think the really smart thing that Abramovich has done, and if you want to compare his approach to, say, Farhad Moshiri's approach, is that the people that he's brought into the club, the executives that he's brought into the club, are trusted, and they're just very, very good at their job. So for example, Guy Lawrence, who's the CEO, he ran Vodafone in the UK. Knows how to run a business. What's her name? Marina. I can never say her name. Granovskia.
Granovskovia.
Yeah, has worked with him going all the way back to Sibneft, when the oil company that he owned. Somebody that he knows, that he trusts, that has done things in business. If you compare the CVs of our board with the CVs of almost every Premier League football club, there's virtually no comparison in terms of what they've achieved in their careers, the external experiences that they've had. And I think that's the difference. That's the difference certainly between us and Chelsea.
I think one of the biggest differences for me up until certainly now is we've got rid of half of the board, or they've either left, like you said before, or we've sacked one of them in the face of in the shape of Marcel Brands. So I think there's only three. Well, there is only three left, isn't there? Grant Ingles being one of them. I don't think. Listen, I look at our board and I can't disagree with you. There's a lack of commercial experience, certainly. I don't personally think the people that are on the board have not got a place on the board. I just think it needs a little bit more. It needs strengthening. There needs to be a wider expertise on there. I agree with you on that. I don't personally agree, and this is my opinion. Mm-hmm. I think the whole sack the board notion isn't something that people can, as a group, get on board with, because it the board, let's be honest, the board is Farhad Moshiri, isn't it? At the moment. And it will be, even at Chelsea, we just referred to Marina then. She is Abramovich's right-hand woman or right-hand man, whatever we call it. She is his eyes and ears on that board. And effectively, if Abramovich wants to remove the others, he can do. And Moshiri will always have that power. I agree with it that we need a wider scope and a lot more expertise on there. But I wouldn't say that Denise Barrett Baxendale doesn't deserve a place on the board. What she's done with our community department is probably the best in the world. So is she CEO material? Maybe not. But to say that she should be sacked from the board, and in my opinion, to still say that Bill Kenwright should be sacked from the board, I think is somewhat disrespectful. And that's where I think, and again, this is not me saying that I disagree with some of your objectives, by the way, and I completely agree that the strength of our board in general is way off where it could or should be. But I think the whole notion, and it doesn't actually appear in your newly formed objectives of sack the board, is something that I think a lot of Evertonians can completely get on board with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. There has to be a degree of continuity. Obviously, you can't just fire everybody and then just bring in new people the following day. Although interestingly, Manchester City did that. The point being is that I think that if you look at the performance record of the individuals, and this is not personal, okay? Denise has done a fantastic job with the community aspect, but that's probably her strength, and that's probably where she should be. And I don't say that in a derogatory sense at all.
Yeah.
I just recognize her skills and where is she most comfortable. Yeah. It's clearly in those areas. Bill is always going to be a divisive character. I personally don't think he's an appropriate chairman in this modern day and age. I think you need somebody with very different skills from him, and nobody's ever going to convince me differently about that. And I've pretty much said that to his face in as respectful way as I possibly can.
Yeah.
A very good chairman would stand up to some of the things that Moshiri does. So a really strong chairman would sometimes say to Farhad Moshiri, "You're the shareholder, we're the directors. You employ us, you pay us to run your club for you with greatest respect. you have to allow us to do these things, and if you don't like them, then you can get rid of us and bring somebody else in. That clearly doesn't happen. So, when Moshiri wants to do something, he just does it, and there doesn't seem to be any consequences to what he does in terms of, consistency with whatever it is that the board are thinking, whatever strategy they may have. So that's the point really about changing these people. If you had a better CEO, obviously the business operates at a much higher level.
Yeah.
If you have a better chairman, then the relationship between the board and the shareholder improves in the sense that it becomes more appropriate for the needs of the business. And that's the bit that Bill fails to do in my eyes. He doesn't protect the business from the activities of the shareholder. And sometimes if you don't have a shareholder that is, nobody can criticize Moshiri for his commitment. Let's make that clear. Yeah. But if you have a shareholder that's a bit rogue, a bit of a loose cannon, I know from other businesses that I'm involved in, the chairman has to step in and protect the interests of the business as against the interests of the shareholder. And that doesn't happen at Everton. Whoever we choose as manager in the next few days, it's going to be Fahad Moshiri's decision. Now, you can throw Chelsea back at me. I understand that. But I bet there's much more to and fro at Chelsea than there is at Everton.
Yeah,
in terms of the decisions made.
I agree with you, and again, I'm not going to argue with the fact that the board needs a bit more depth. I think what we want to get to in this podcast, and like I said about your opening statements, I support everything you said at the start.
Yeah,
I think the objectives and the intentions of the campaign are spot on, and you've acknowledged before. I think maybe the message could improve, the communications could improve. That's what we're here to try and help you with, and that's what I want to try and get to. Just a few questions on that, going back to the message a little bit more. There's two things really. One thing refers a little bit back to the structure of the board. How do you feel about the whole People's Club slogan? Because for me, that in itself is almost an issue for the club from a branding perspective, and also almost in the way that you assemble the board in falling in line with that whole People's Club notion. Because for me, that's one of the reasons why Denise Baxendale is chairman. As CEO, because it falls in line with the whole we're the People's Club. She's raised the community profile. We'll always have that community in mind, and that's what our CEO is driving. That's my opinion on it. How do you feel about that? Do you think there's anything in that? Do we need to shake that?
I would agree with you. I think it's very limiting. I think you have to recognise that first of all, we're a professional sports body here, and we're in the most competitive. What we're told is the most competitive competition in the world in terms of club football.
Absolutely.
So that needs to be the focus. So what is it that you do about branding? What is it that you do about the club's culture that helps you become successful in what is the most competitive environment within your industry? And we're nowhere near that. When we talk about the players not putting a shift in, the players, being half a yard short, maybe, mentally not being quite with it, like the slow starts that we've had this season, last season, etc. This is all part of the same thing. It's all part of the corporate culture, the culture of the club. And other clubs have it off to a T because they see that there's a competitive advantage in terms of their thought process, their culture. We're in the 19th century still, or 20th century still, in terms of our corporate culture thinking. The People's Club is just part of that.
Yeah, I agree with it. It was something that I've thought about for a long time, and certainly you guys are getting to that point, I think, and I think it will be something that comes out in the wash. The second part of my question was the wording of the 27 campaign. Obviously, we explained it at the start. I think it's pretty obvious. My first point, being honest, again, was I thought it was a little bit like a self-entitled statement, as if to say we have the right to win trophies. for me, you look at like Newcastle United, for example. I'm not saying that this is. I'm saying that they're a club that has been perfectly run or whatever, but obviously a very passionate fan base like ourselves. They haven't won a trophy for a hell of a long time, not including any championship honours. I'm talking about at the top level. I'm just not sure that the 27 campaign itself it is something that I think some fans will ever get behind, just from the name itself.
Well, first of all, that's a very interesting observation. And I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for the rest of the people, because we've never talked about this. The sole purpose behind being a football club is to win competitions. That's, to me, in any sport.
Yeah, but is it not? You're right. It's obviously something everyone's trying to do, but no one's, even the best run organized. There's some very well run football clubs in this country. I'm not just talking about Premier League clubs. There's some clubs that are run very well within the resources they've got, and sometimes they've got the ceiling based on where they are in the country. For example, they're never going to attract fans due to the geographical location or the demographic. If they don't win trophies, does that mean they'll never be an organisation that people can get behind? Is that
no? So it depends. One of the questions actually that we're asking Farhad Moshiri is, can he define what success means to him? So success to me means that you see whoever our captain is lifting, one or more trophies at the end of every season, and that we're in the Champions League, and Everton fans are experiencing all the things that the very top club, the fans of the very top clubs experience year in, year out. The European nights away, the finals, semi-finals, finals, etc. That to me defines success for a football club. But I accept entirely that you can, and another club will have entirely different objectives and aims. Accrington Stanley is a fantastically successful football club in terms of what it does in its community, in terms of what it does in terms of the amount of money that it has. A little club like Accrington Stanley gives away a free football shirt every year to all of the primary school kids in the town. That's how engaged, that's how close they are to their local community. By any stretch, that's success. Then they're not going to win the Premier League. They're not going to win Champions League or anything. But then that's not their objective. So it comes back to what is your objective, and that's one of the questions that Moshiri has to answer.
If Moshiri's answer to that, then, for argument's sake, because you just mentioned that yourself, if Moshiri's answer was that I want us to regularly qualify for European competitions and to compete, would that satisfy you?
It would be a long way towards satisfying.
Because it's not a trophy, is it? That's my point. It's
the simple answer is no, it wouldn't, because I want us to win trophies.
Yeah.
But it would be an awful lot near. We would be an awful lot nearer to doing that if we were in that position.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I think that's it for me. I find it hard. And again, look, there's, like you said at the start of your response there, it's an interesting way to look at it. The way I look at it is success is earned over a certain period of time, and whether that takes 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, sometimes projects take longer than others. I'm not suggesting here that, by the way, that Moshiri's got this secret project we're not aware of, because if it is a secret project, it's the best secret ever kept, because we haven't got a clue what's going on. But I just feel like the 27, like for example, next year, is it 20? Does it become the 28, then 29, then 30, then 31? Does that keep on going?
Yeah,
do we keep campaigning until we win a trophy again? And this is the last part of that question, because it's the loaded one. If we win the FA Cup next year but go down, does the campaign end because we've won a trophy?
No, I don't think it does, because if we won, for example, the FA Cup this year,
and we got relegated.
Well, it doesn't even matter if we get relegated. Well, it does matter if we got relegated or not. But
it drought, doesn't it? Because that's obviously the last thing on the.
Well, it does, but it doesn't change anything about the way that the club is run. And that's the point. it's all about the way the club is run at the end of the day. And in a sense, the 27 years thing is, it's a symptom. We're explaining the pain that you have as an Evertonian if it is the case that you want us to win something, which I think most Evertonians do. And a lot would be very satisfied if we won the FA Cup. Look, I remember, the 1995 final like yesterday, as I'm sure you guys do. And I remember the single best moment I've ever had as an Evertonian was when we won the FA Cup in '84, because that was the first time I experienced us winning something. So I always remember that moment at Wembley. So that would satisfy an awful lot of people, but it wouldn't change the running of the club, and it wouldn't make us a more successful, it wouldn't make us a better run club.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Millsy, I think you've got some questions.
No, it's been great to have Paul on, and we don't want to keep him too much longer. But
you don't want to listen to me too much longer.
You just said that you could see that we remember 1995. So you're saying that we look old. So I might grill you there like Judgy did. No, to be honest, we've got some Q&A on Twitter. Paul very kindly said that we can invite questions. I'm not going to name anybody. We asked for DMs because we don't want the timeline to go all crazy. But before we get there, Paul, if you don't mind, we're recording this on the Wednesday after the sort of the media blast or the wrongly worded tweet that was a protest stand the live bird last night. Would you like to address that?
Yeah, sure. First of all, it didn't say protest; it just said gathering.
Okay.
And I take full responsibility because it was me that put the tweet out. I didn't ask anybody else before I put the tweet out. I just did it because the reason for doing what we did last night at the Royal Library building was to get some media attention. And the one thing that we, as I said at the beginning, the one thing that we've been very successful so far is getting the engagement of people in the media. So, like today, The Guardian, The Times, The Daily Mail, Sky Sports, showed photographs and they wrote stuff about what happened last night. If the fan base misinterpreted what the tweet said, then I take full responsibility for it. In my own eyes, the tweet was pretty clear in terms of what it was, but I can also accept that other people might have seen it differently. And if they saw it differently, then they obviously would have felt that they were not being part of something. And I think one of the things that we have to do, both as the 27 years campaign, but all the other campaigns that are popping up, is that we have to give fans ownership of it. For it to become a real success, they have to feel as if they're part of it, and as if they're part of the decision-making process, and as if they're contributing to the ideas that are behind the campaign. I've got a pretty strong character, so I see a hole. I'll quite happily fill it with all of my ideas until somebody stops me from filling it. But that doesn't mean to say that other people shouldn't be contributing their ideas, and that we shouldn't be more receptive to other people. So, the lesson from last night will be that we need to provide ownership to the whole of the fan base, not just as is perceived a small number of people who are running this account. No,
that's fair. And I mean, just to bottom line that one, I know Hannah from Hans Tours, and she took some abuse last night. I feel very sorry for Hannah. I've known her, I'm showing my age now, for over 20 years. So I think we need to get to a point where division stops. And I don't know how we do that. I think it may be on me, Judgy, maybe on you, maybe on Farhad Mashiri, but at some point, division has to stop, because when people are getting attacked on social media for having an opinion or for their WhatsApp being leaked, I think we're going too far as a fan base. That's just my opinion as me. We've got some Twitter questions, Paul. We're going to fly through them. You might have answered them already on a podcast, so if you have, very, very quick answers if you don't mind. We're not going to name anybody's name because they were all DMs and I don't want to out anybody. Very, very quickly, what are you protesting against, you being the 27 group campaign, sorry?
The appalling running of the football club.
Okay. What's the objective of the movement and how will that be measured?
The objective of the movement is to get Fahad Mashiri to listen, to engage, and to act, and it'll be measured against each of those things. So he might listen to us, he might even meet us, or he might meet other Evertonians, I don't know. But unless he does the acting bit, and unless he makes the changes, then we will fail.
Okay. Someone says, I feel the campaign has been a bit muddled, and you also accept it takes time for board change.
Well, I think Mashiri's had 6 years to change the board, and 6 years to change the corporate culture, and 6 years to change his behaviour, and he's not done that yet. In terms of, is the message muddled? Yeah, I'll take that on board. Yeah.
Okay. Do you consider the current board responsible for 27 years without a trophy if we don't win one this season?
Certain members of the board, so the chairman, yes. But the current board is there's symptoms of the problems that the club have had for many, many years in terms of the governance issues surrounding the club. So they're effectively representatives of all the bad decisions that have been made in the past. The issue would be that they've not reversed those bad decisions. They've just continued and added to them. So yes, they are, in a sense, they are responsible.
Okay, we've got 3 more. When will the protesting stop, and what needs to be achieved in order for it to be stopped?
Well, I can't speak for everybody else, but it would have to be to the point where we get that engagement and we get some acknowledgement of the need for change and what those changes would be.
So just on that, Paul, and probably you've answered this enough times anyway, but that's got to start on it with the structure of the board in terms of, because the governance filters down from there, and obviously the expertise and them identifying the right people to fulfill the roles below the board. It would have to start there, wouldn't it?
It would, but that decision would have to be made by Fahad Mashiri.
Of course, yeah.
Final 2, and this could be a double-barreled question, really. Why do you think there hasn't been much engagement from the fans? That's a personal opinion, maybe. And do you think the message has been communicated well enough?
I think can I answer the second question first? I think that I think the message has been really well communicated to the media and people who are in football, because we've had loads and loads of engagement from those people and loads of people interested in what we're doing. I think we need to get much better at improving the messaging to fans, and we have to recognize that only the minority of fans are active on social media. So we have to find other ways of addressing, the 40,000 that go to Goodison every week and the hundreds of thousands of Evertonians around the world.
No, that's fair. No, Paul, it's been really kind of you to come on and give us your time, and you've answered some really, really tough questions, which I think maybe there's a section of Evertonians who needed that, and I'm glad you've came on and done that, and I hope this helps you guys. I hope this helps the club more than anything. I hope this helps the club, because for me personally, I've not really enjoyed going to Goodison for a while. I don't really know why. I can't put my finger on it. I just feel a little bit of disconnection. Maybe what you're saying is completely true. Maybe what you're saying is completely wrong. I just don't know. I just feel there's a disconnection. So I really hope that something like this helps the fans get united. Judgy, do you want to close on this?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I was one of the fans, I don't mind in saying this, that I felt that this movement in particular was going to make that disconnect even bigger, or widen the gap between the not necessarily the board, because the board do, like you said before, seem like a distance. Farhad Mashiri particularly seems so far away that we're nowhere near it. But I think there's been a divide in our fan base in particular for quite a while, probably certainly the last 2 to 3 years, but in recent times with the appointment of he who shall not be named, it got even worse. And my fear was that the campaign was going to make that atmosphere that like Millsy said, has been quite toxic, even worse. But having tried to get to know the objectives a lot better and understand them, and certainly from the last 40 minutes, I am encouraged that if you can continue the momentum that you've got now, and like you say, if you can get the fans on board and get everyone to understand on their own level what it means, and the fact that it is about trying to get the best for our football. It's not about anyone's ego or anyone trying to get trying to get recognised for any reason. then I'm confident that it is for the best of the club, and I'm delighted with, you know, I'm say delighted. I'm encouraged by what he's doing, because I'm not sure it was up until probably the end of this call, to be honest.
Well, thanks for saying that. Look, at the end of the day, it's going to be down to action rather than words. You know, words are easy. I talk for a living, so I can talk to anybody about it. You know, for as long as you want me to. It's all down to action, and it's all down to how the campaign now reacts to the feedback that it's had in the last 24 hours. Conversations like this, which are really useful. And the proof of the pudding will be in what we do in the future and how we engage more with the fans. Because actually, the more we engage with the fans, the stronger our argument is to Farhad Moshiri. So we have a vested interest in doing that.
That's fair. If anybody's interested in even just following along on what the 27 campaign are doing, if you're on Twitter, please get over to @27years campaign. If you want to follow Paul, who does some great business matters posts, I've followed your stuff for years, Paul. It's been really, really great to speak to you tonight. So thank you very much for coming on Across the Park podcast.
Anytime. Thank you.
Cheers, Paul. Thank you.
Cheers.